Hey, what is up, all you lonely watchers out there? I've played a lot of games over the course of my life, and one thing I've always wanted to do with them is a challenge run. I mean, you have things like randomizers, you have no death runs, you have, not collecting any items, not upgrading, things like that across all different types of games. But the one that is most intriguing to me is the Pokemon Nuzlocke. Pretty simple procedure. You must nickname all of your Pokemon. You can only catch the first Pokemon to show up on a route. And the most crucial rule, if one of your Pokemon faints, it is dead and cannot be used for the rest of the run. Now, I've never been a real big Pokemon fan, but this idea has fascinated me for a long time. And since I'm a Yokai Watch fan, back in my Peach Fuzz era of streaming, we did a Nuzlocke for Yokai Watch 1. This is my first attempt at my first Nuzlocke, so I did not expect it to go as well as it did, but we passed. I would have made a video on it if it wasn't both 1, so easy, and 2, the fact that I recorded gameplay with my phone back then, because I did not mod my 3DS or have a capture card, like an idiot. But in the last 2 episodes, I did use the very temperamental Snicker stream in my very current big boy setup. I did lose 4 yokai, but that was still pretty good for my first attempt of my first Nuzlocke ever. And a little over a month later, the hunger struck again. I wanted that rush again. It was at that time that I decided I would do another Nuzlocke. Hi, I'm Jamie, aka LonelyFubuki, and this is the tale of my attempt at a Yokai Watch 2 Nuzlocke. So Yokai Watch 2 is a much harder game, especially the final boss. Despite this, I decided to make the Nuzlocke rules themselves this time around more challenging. They were cleaned up later on, but here's what we started with. 1. Any yokai who faints must be released. 2. I must nickname every yokai I receive. 3. I may not obtain any duplicate yokai. 4. I may befriend 1 yokai per area in the overworld or dungeon. This does not include separate floors, and this also excludes any auto-befriends or yokai required for story progression. I cannot use any passwords, QR codes, yokai cam, street pass, or crankikai. I am not able to trade with other players or myself. I can only befriend other yokai by using the means that my current party members have. This means I am not allowed to feed a yokai their favorite food or poke them. But I can use the popularity skill as well as ultimates like Loving Slap that increase our befriending odds. Evolutions, as voted by chat, are allowed. Fusion in general is prohibited, whether it's yokai or items. I must befriend the first yokai to ask me in a given area. This does not reset with watch rank. And I am not allowed to soft reset. Now, I know you may find some problems with the rule set, and I don't want to spoil too much, but they will be corrected later on. If you would like to see the raw, unedited playthrough, I'll link the VOD playlist in the description. Without further ado, let's get to watching. For this run, I went with Psychic Spectres as the version. I also picked Katie because Nate is in no way comparable. I went through all the opening jazz before I got to the most important decision of the run. Soul Donuts or Spirit Donuts. The chat decided on Spirit Donuts, which I was very proud of. After being introduced to bug catching, the worst part of the game, I made my way to the mysterious memory store and purchased this mystical watch from Knickknack for the single dollar I had left. Except he doesn't even take the dollar from me. He encourages me to use it in the Gashapon machine outside, to which I do, and Whisper pops out. Ensue the trope of a character getting amnesia and then suddenly remembering everything. Except there's someone missing here. Jibanyan! We make our way to the haunted intersection in which Jibanyan conveniently happens to still be, and make our first befriend of the run. I name him Skidmark after Nick's level's name for him, which I did let him know I was using beforehand in the first Nuzlocke. He's been making a lot of Yokai Watch videos recently, and streaming it a lot on Twitch. So I encourage you to check them out via the link in the description. We make our way over to the memory store, which had vanished from memory. On the way home, we encounter and auto-befriend a Bushido. The chat names him Mr. Clean before we head home. On to Chapter 2. We start off by heading to the Crankakai and use our one and only crank, as it is required to progress the story. Thankfully, we do get to pick who we get here though, and I pick Tattletale. She's a great early game healer who has a great evo for later on, and we could easily take her to the end of the game. I named her Boomer because that was the name we gave to her in my first Yokai Watch Nuzlocke. The first key quest is of little substance. We completely destroy the Nosers. And in the third key quest, we befriend a Hungramps, which I name Maga because, well, look at him. He's that age. We do some grinding in Uptown Springdale to get a Pandal who the chat decided to name Walk. Now it's time for the infamous Eddie quest. While chasing the cat though, I befriended a Dumbcap and named him Bottom Hat, not realizing I had already befriended a yokai in Uptown Springdale. I dropped his medal right away, and since we didn't use him in battle yet, the run is still a go. It was also during this period that we lost Boomer to a Pandal. This was a massive shame because she would be an asset to the end of the game. Since she was a story befriend, I cannot drop her medal. I also cannot replace her because I have less than 6 yokai on my team at this point. My solution was to back row her and avoid putting her out so that she cannot affect the battle. If she does heal or attack, the run is void and must be restarted. Maga has subbed in as our primary healer for now. We completed the quest in the sewer and befriended Swelton, who was named Nikokado by our amazing regular TB. Time for the next chapter. We befriended Baku in the homework quest and named him Honk Shu from the previous Nuzlocke. After the very disturbing eating minigame, which has no reason to exist, we did some more key quests. We were required to get an ache, which chat named Gummy, but unfortunately since the game didn't make us fuse him with his item for the quest, we were unable to obtain Pain. Which is a shame because he would have been a great high rank for this early in the game. During the Gate of Whimsy quest, we befriend a Peck Pocket and name him Grimace. It's always good to have an evolving yokai. Even if we don't put him on the team, he could be useful later. We then grinded bug catching for a little bit. Even though it's painful, bugs can be traded for JP at Jungle Hunter, which in turn can be traded for X-Orbs, which could be very valuable later, so that we're not spending a ton of time just grinding random enemies and risking our yokai dying. We end up using this strategy a lot later on to buff up our levels, and use it to recruit yokai we get later on who aren't on the level of the team. It was getting late and I made a lot of progress, so I decided to call it a night. Only one yokai was lost. It was earlier than I would have liked, but we can still do this, chat. We started off today by doing some more bug catching before visiting Mr. Goodsight to get the very first watch upgrade of the run. This involves visiting Wadafind at night, where we encounter a Wiglin and name him Help Me. He doesn't count for our Shopper's Row yokai though, as he's required later in San Fantastico for a dungeon. It is then after we retrieve Mr. Goodsight's screwdriver that we experience our very first Terror Time. Luckily, Terror Time in this game doesn't result in a near impossible Gargaros fight, but instead Gargaros just swiping the team out of Terror Time. So we don't have to worry about him wiping our team in this game. After getting our watch upgrade, we head to the elementary school at night and befriend a Mochismo that chat named Cheese, with a Z. We did unfortunately lose Maga in the process. We replaced him with Kelp Me, our last and probably best healer at this point. Though we experienced some losses, our team is still pretty beefy at this point, so getting to the school roof and taking out Gutsy Bones was a breeze. Once his bandage was off, he just did not stand a chance. After that, the plot starts to ramp up. Megan Yon convinces us to visit Grandma, and before I go to do that, I should catch some bugs and make other preparations before we're cut off from Springdale. During this, we pick up a Snaggly in Mount Wildwood that JQ names Tentacle. We use Tentacle to replace Nikokado, since Tentacle has an amazing evolution if you're patient. We went up to the mansion to try to get a slice and rice, but instead befriended a Laffalata that chat named British. We made the treacherous journey to Grandma's house by waiting for real-world time on the train. Isn't that a fun concept? We did 2 of the key quests and saved the last one for another day. And honestly, if we keep losing yokai at this rate, I don't know if this run is gonna last. Today I streamed for 6 hours straight, so it was gonna be a long one for sure. We beat the Wall Kappa quest before saving Mirapo, who was named Goopy by chat. Battling through Mount Middleton, we befriended a Tantroni who chat named Tomato. And after heading home and eating again, we befriended a Tungus during the night. Gotta love those healer auto-befriends, we could really use them. The chat named her Fettuccine, and we slept until the daytime. Now this is where the real story begins. After an impressive lore drop and a very easy fight against Meganyan, Hovernyan takes us to the past. And yes, Old Springdale and Old Harrisville are considered separate locations from Springdale and Harrisville. On our way to Old Springdale, we auto-befriend a Miradox that chat names Huggy Wuggy, allowing us to fully time travel and eventually fast travel across the map, which is a godsend in this game. We replaced Honkshu with our very first A rank, Huggy Wuggy. While doing some key quests, we befriend some yokai in the past. First is a Pitapat in Old Springdale chat named Sprint, and a Boohoo in Mount Wildwood I named Emo Burb after the first Nuzlocke. Yet again, we are definitely going to keep up these legacy names. We did some grinding before we head back to the present to complete the Mr. Goodsight quest. And it was during this time that Kelpme finally evolved into Kelbacabana. When we made it back to Springdale to find the Hecapino, we made one of the worst mistakes of this attempt, chasing a yo criminal. I did not know that Apney was going to be that strong. I was just thinking about the reward we would get in return. She quickly wiped our team and we had to replace everyone. At this point, we did not have the rule in place that a team wipe results in a loss, so we continue with our new team as follows. Fettuccine, Nikocado, Tomato, Cheese, Honkshu, and Goopy. Besides Honkshu, all of our high ranks and evolutions were gone, leaving only the scraps left. We held up our chins though and continued with the run from there. When we went back to Old Springdale, we spent a good chunk of time grinding our team back up to be on level. With all of the Watch Part quests done, it was time to befriend all of Kenny's classic yokai. We started with Palisol, we named Mary after Mary Poppins, and next we moved on to Faux Kappa. I named him after Nero, a friend of mine. It was during this battle though that we lost Nikocado. Nero became his replacement, and he was our only A rank at this point, probably the last. Next was Nomi, which a friend of mine, Mystic Warriors, wanted named Ari, so they were. By the way, she makes awesome art, including my avatar. Make sure to check her out in the description. We went to Excellent Tower with our new team to face Dragon with no problems. We befriended Predictable, and YouTuber Azatron 5000, link in the description, suggested the name Pikmin for him. I wanted to name him Mocha, but whatever. We saved Mermaiden for the next day, as Cap and Crash would be a little intimidating at this point. We messed around with the summoning app before clocking out. Another 6-hour day. We spent about an hour grinding before disaster struck. When we were walking through Springdale, we accidentally jaywalked one too many times. The god of destruction and punishing misbehaving children, Snartle, descended and wiped the entire team. It was at this point, after some bickering, that I decided to revamp the rules and restart the run. The new rules are as follows. If a yokai dies, they must be dropped if possible and cannot be used for the rest of the run. I must nickname every yokai, either by me or by the chat. I may not obtain any duplicate yokai. I might only befriend the first yokai to ask me in a given area or dungeon. Separate floors of a dungeon count as one area, collectively. I may obtain auto-befriends and yokai required for story progression, and it not count towards the encounter. If I do a side quest not required for story progression, and I'm given a yokai during that quest as a reward, I cannot use it. No passwords, QR codes, street pass, game link, trading, blasters, psychic blasters, or crankakai, including the Oni crank, as well as any other in-game collaboration with other players. I cannot use any method outside of a yokai's abilities to befriend new yokai. This means poking non-boss yokai and feeding yokai their favorite food is prohibited, but the popularity skill and ultimates such as Loving Slap are allowed. Evolutions are allowed as voted by chat as long as they are not fusion evolutions. Fusion is prohibited, including both yokai fusions and item fusions. Sorcery is prohibited. Soft resetting for a better outcome is prohibited. And finally, if my team is fully wiped under any circumstance, then the run is officially dead and I must start over. With this new clause and revamped rules, we started the run again. To speed things up, chat allowed me to skip cutscenes we already watched so that we didn't have to spend nearly as much time getting back to where we were at. For the first chapter, everything went pretty much the same. Besides the fact that Bushido's name was changed to Azza after the YouTuber Azatron 5000 I mentioned earlier, and chat decided to change Hungramp's name to Peepaw. We also befriended a Caden in Uptown Springdale instead of Pandal. We named him OJ Simp over the fact that he likes to simp for orange juice, his favorite food in game, juice. This was my first name for him in our first Nuzlocke, and he was the MVP back then. I'm also a little too proud of that name. It was from this point that I decided that OJ Simp would be with us till the very end, no matter the cost. We also befriended a Snot-So-Long while trying to complete the fusion quest and named him Suck, because he sucks. While doing the first watch upgrade, we picked up a Kelpme again since he didn't add to the counter, as well as a Badinyan who did add to the counter. Which honestly, he's probably the best case scenario for a Shopper's Row yokai. Since I thought it was an evolution, I kept the name Skidmark. I replaced Jibanyan with the new Skidmark and Honkshu with Kelpme. As luck would have it, we picked up a Mochismo again in the school with the same name, and clobbered Gutsy Bones without losing a single yokai. After that, we spent some time bug catching before attempting yet again to get a Slice and Rice, only to befriend Laughalada again. Once we make our way to Harrisville, we befriend a Fidgefant in the Wall Kappa quest and named him Herman after Pee Wee Herman. We befriend Goopy again, Tomato in Mount Middleton, and Fettuccine in the story. What are the odds pretty much all the yokai besides OJ Simp would be the same? It's destiny, that's what I say. Once we beat Meganyan, I decided that was it for the day. We made a lot of progress, and we had no deaths so far on this second attempt, so things were looking really good. We started today by befriending Huggy Wuggy again and heading to Old Springdale. We finished up all the Watch Part quests, as well as the classic yokai quests we had done last time, and now we are officially treading new ground. It was time to do Mermaiden's quest and face Cap'n Crash. It was off to San Fantastico for us, after we upgraded our watch, of course. Cap'n Crash was shaping up to be our most challenging boss yet. We enter the cave and still have to befriend the dancing trio, because Kelpme evolved, so we could no longer summon him to the Baffle board. I decided to avoid conflict with the no duplicates rule by befriending him for the Baffle board but not using him in battle. While battling, OJ Simp evolved into his final form, Kateable. It was at this point that I knew he was ready to face this journey with us once again. We then pick up the dancing trio surprisingly quickly, naming Steppa Seaweed, Wiglin Redeye, and Rith Mary Jane. We also picked up a heel named Noodle to count for our yokai in San Fantastico. With that out of the way, it was time for Cap'n Crash. His control over our reel was incredibly annoying, but our team was beefy and we had healers covering all the yokai, so it ended up being surprisingly easy with him only going down in a couple minutes. We named Mermaiden Tuna and headed out. On the way back to Harrisville though, we picked up a flushback I named Skibbity, since we were gonna need him for the next chapter's key quest. Anyway, now that we're back in past Harrisville, it was time to beat Kin and Gin. Although they may technically be unbeatable bosses, they were pushovers. We then get to engage in quite literally the best minigame in the entire series. Well, besides the shopping minigame in Yokai Watch 3, of course. With that said and done, it was time for the filler chapter. And yes, while I do like it, there isn't much to talk about until the end, because iClone was gonna be our main problem this chapter. Who knew yokai could get no maidens and be racist? At this point, the road there was easy and the boss did not scare me. As long as I focused my attacks and paid attention to the wheel, everything would be fine. We took down iClone with few scary moments and made our final auto-befriend of the game, Brokenbrella. The chat decided to name him Boyfail. We messed around with the summoning app again before calling it a day. The fact that we have made so much more progress and lost 0 yokai was incredible. Today we tackled the dreaded battle between the bony spirits and the fleshy souls. We did still pick the bony spirits army though. The battles before him weren't that bad, but Total Dude was more of a powerhouse than I thought he would be. Either way, we took him out fine enough. And once the war had settled a little bit, Dame Deadtime decided to make her entrance. After spewing some of her evil nonsense, she leaves Unfairy for the army generals to deal with. While that happens, we gotta prepare by setting out to find the one and only Master Nyada. His first 2 trials were cakewalks, but before we could go to the third one, we needed to upgrade our watch, the final upgrade we would need for the run. Unfortunately, this was the point that we started to falter. Darn you, Nocturne Hospital! During one of our required battles, Boomer refused to heal, and Nerd took full advantage. Our first loss of the run, Skidmark, is down. Rest in peace, my little kitty. We replaced him with Nero and moved up the levels of the hospital. We were already being punched down, but the final yokai required for this quest, Goruma, one-shotted our best and one of only 2 viable endgame healers, Boomer. 2 of our biggest assets, gone. Honestly though, payback for not healing Skidmark. We made our way back to the past, A-rank watch in hand, and sulk while grinding up Nero and Grimace, our replacements for Boomer and Skidmark. This is basically how we spend the rest of the day. We started today by taking an hour and a half to finish leveling for Demuncher before charging into battle. Since we had to level up those 2 new guys, our back row was on level while our front row was above level, making the battle a breeze. We used the Mega X-Orb we get from the trial to get Nero caught up a little more, and head on our way. It was time to stop this nonsense and take out the first Wicked General, Unfairy. Yeah, she was pretty easy. Not much to say here. With that done, we are officially in the endgame, which will be very treacherous. Dame Deadtime catches us making an escape and sends us back to the future to see that the Wickeds have taken over Springdale with the Dead Cloud. It is now our duty to go back to the past and stop them. After grinding a little in the present, of course. Once we find the baffle board and make it back to the past, we do some grinding and take out 2 of the Wicked Generals, Untidy and Unpleasant, along with their fog machines. It was with this accomplishment that we yet again call it a day. We spent almost the entire day planning and preparing for Dame Deadtime's battle. Dame Deadtime has a level steal ability, which would be the hardest part of this run to deal with. She can level any yokai on our team down by 1 and summon a wicked yokai to fight alongside her of the same level of the yokai that she stole from. I had come up with a plan though. Tank up Azza, OJ Simp, and Kelpme, while training our very underlevel Skibbity, Tuna, and Noodle in the back row. This was a stalling team consisting of 1 attacker and 2 healers. Once we got them close to Dame Deadtime's level but still under-leveled, we would fight against her with those rows. We put the B team out first, and once she level steals the maximum of twice at once, switch to the front row of tanks, and put a target on Dame Dead Time. This way, the wicked yokai she summons won't be overpowering, and we can just wail on her with our tanks without her being able to steal our levels, as long as we don't take out the wickeds that she summoned. After we beat Dame Dead Time, we would put Grimace, Nero, and Huggy Wuggy back on the team. Our B team could also act as death fodder. No harm, no foul if they die, because we don't need them for the final boss, Dame Demona. Once the B team made it to the late 30s, we stopped grinding them and reassembled the complete A team, front and back row. We spent the rest of the day doing this to prepare for the finale. We took out the remaining wicked generals, Unkind and Unkeen, with our team in the early to late 50s. It was at this point that we called it a day. We started today by listening to the opening theme fully before heading into what would hopefully be the Nuzlocke finale, as there were only a few battles left. Once our Dame Dead Time team was assembled, my strategy actually worked surprisingly well. We had no deaths in round 1, and round 2 was looking up. Kin and Gin were also easy, but we also couldn't lose anyone here, so it matters not. Since Kenny's yokai did not have our nicknames that we assigned to our yokai, I am basically treating these as separate yokai in the game's code. Therefore, if one gets knocked out, we do not lose them in our run. It was now time to hit Dame Dead Time one last time. It was during the second battle, however, that Noodle had fell. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. We stopped to have a moment of silence before finishing the slaying of Dame Dead Time. I consider this the hardest boss of the run. Dame Demona should be a cakewalk in comparison. It took a lot of focus and strategy, but after 10 minutes of painful battling, with many scary moments. Buff us up one last time! I can't believe we're actually doing this. No! And you had to steal it. No, 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 no! 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 Alright, you're officially demoted to back row for the rest of the time. We're not risking you losing. Grimace! Congrats! With love, courage, and moxie! We did it, chat! We did it! Oh, that feels good! We managed to take down Dame Demona. And the best part, we didn't lose a single yokai. And with Dame Demona going down, we had officially beaten the Yokai Watch 2 Nuzlocke. I am very impressed by the fact that we only lost 3 yokai during this run, and all of them were so late in the game. Rest in peace, Skidmark, Boomer, and Noodle. Your deaths were not in vain. This challenge, along with the first, was so fun. Yokai Watch 2 just feels like a good game to do a challenge run like this with, and it is much harder than the first. And while I did enjoy nuzlocking both games, this one was much more of a blast. And on top of it all, I'm glad I got to have this adventure with you guys. Everyone who showed up to every stream, everyone who suggested a nickname, everyone who watched the VODs afterwards, and even all of you who are watching this video right now. Thank you so much to everyone in the pipeline who made this run truly special. Now, the other Yokai Watch games are also going to be tricky, but we will get there soon enough. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to all my lonely watchers out there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.